The following is historical fiction, based on the story of the martyrdom of Ignatius of Antioch. This is the first foray of ours into the realm of historical fiction, and I'm not convinced this is what we'll be doing on this channel, but it seemed worth trying. So please enjoy Wheat to the Lions, the story of the martyrdom of Ignatius. Chapter 1. The Chains of Antioch. The sun hung low over Antioch, casting long shadows across the bustling marketplace, where the air was thick with the scent of spices, freshly baked bread, and the distant tang of the Euphrates River. The vibrant colors of fabric stalls, deep blues, fiery reds, and bright yellows, filled the streets like a painter's palette, while merchants shouted their wares to a cacophony of haggling voices. Children darted between legs, their laughter mingling with the calls of vendors hawking everything from olives to handcrafted pottery. Marcus wiped the sweat from his brow as he moved through the crowd, his heart racing with the pulse of the city. He was no longer a slave, yet the memory of those chains still haunted him, a whisper that echoed in his mind. He clutched a bundle of parchment and quills tightly, a reminder of his new role as the attendant to Saint Ignatius, whose presence in the city brought both hope and fear. "Marcus!" a familiar voice called out, breaking through the din. He turned to see Ignatius, a stout man with a long beard now streaked with grey, engaged in quiet conversation with a group of local Christians. Ignatius's deep-set brown eyes radiated warmth, a stark contrast to the tension that had begun to grip Antioch since the recent imperial decrees against their faith. As Marcus approached, he could hear snippets of their conversation, voices low, cautious. "They say there will be loyalty tests," whispered a merchant, his hands trembling as he sorted through a pile of figs. "Anyone who refuses to offer sacrifices to the emperor will face execution." "Fear is a tool of the empire," Ignatius replied softly, his voice steady. "But we must not allow it to silence our faith. Remember, we are called to be wheat for the lions, to stand firm in our beliefs, whatever the cost." Marcus's stomach twisted at Ignatius's words. The image of lions tearing into the flesh of the faithful had been etched into his mind since he had first heard the stories. He felt like a ghost, hovering on the precipice of faith while the world around him swirled with vibrant life. "Do you believe that?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can you truly face such horrors?" Ignatius turned to him, his expression a blend of compassion and strength. "Courage is not the absence of fear, Marcus. It is the resolve to act despite it. Remember, the Lord walks with us through the valley of shadows." The crowd shifted, and as Marcus organized supplies for Ignatius, he overheard snippets of conversation that made his heart race. "A man was executed yesterday," said one woman, her voice trembling. "They say he refused to renounce his faith. They say he cried out for Christ until the end." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had only recently embraced this new faith, and the specter of persecution loomed large over him. He glanced at Ignatius, who was surrounded by the faithful, their faces a mix of hope and fear. How could one man inspire such loyalty in a time of such terror? As the sun dipped lower, casting hues of orange and pink across the sky, a commotion erupted at the far end of the marketplace. A crowd gathered, drawn by the urgency of the moment. Marcus felt his heart race as he and Ignatius moved toward the source of the uproar, the air thick with tension. They pushed through the throng until they reached the front, where a wooden platform had been hastily erected. Atop it stood a man, bound and bruised, his face a mask of defiance. A centurion, a burly man with a scarred face, stood beside him, arms crossed, radiating authority. "Citizens of Antioch," the centurion's voice boomed, silencing the crowd. "This man is accused of treason against the empire. He refused to offer sacrifice to the emperor, and so he shall pay the price." Marcus's breath caught in his throat as he met the condemned man's gaze. There was no fear in his eyes, only a fierce resolve. "I will not betray my faith," the man shouted, his voice ringing out across the square. "For Christ is the true King." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest as he felt Ignatius's hand on his shoulder, grounding him amidst the chaos. "Do not look away, Marcus," Ignatius murmured. "This is the reality of our faith. We must bear witness." The centurion's expression hardened as he signaled to his soldiers. Let his death be a lesson to all who would defy Rome. As the executioner raised a sword, the condemned man cried out once more, "Remember me, brethren. I go to my Savior." His voice echoed through the marketplace, and in that moment, Marcus felt a pull deep within him, a longing to embrace the courage that Ignatius spoke of, but fear gripped him like a vice. He turned to Ignatius, seeking guidance, but the elder's gaze was fixed on the man before them, unwavering. The blade fell, and the gasp of the crowd was a collective inhale of horror. Marcus's heart raced as he stumbled back, his vision blurring. He felt as though the very ground beneath him had shifted, the vibrant life of Antioch fading into a distant memory. "Breathe, Marcus," Ignatius said, his voice steady yet filled with gravity. "This is the cost of discipleship. We cannot shy away from the truth of our faith." They stepped away from the crowd, moving toward a nearby temple courtyard, where the air felt cooler, the weight of the day pressing heavily on Marcus's shoulders. The whispers of the marketplace faded, replaced by the rustle of leaves and the distant sound of water trickling from a fountain. "I never thought," Marcus began, his voice trembling. "I thought faith would bring peace, not this." Ignatius regarded him with a deep understanding, his eyes reflecting the wisdom of years spent in the trenches of faith. "Peace often comes at a cost, my son. Every martyr is a seed that falls to the ground, bringing forth new life in the church. We must be willing to bear witness, even when it frightens us." "But how can we endure this?" Marcus asked, his voice cracking with emotion. "I do not know if I have the strength." "Strength is found in community, in the love we share for one another," Ignatius replied, resting a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You are not alone in this. Together, we can face whatever comes, as long as we hold fast to our faith." Marcus took a deep breath, the weight of the day settling heavily upon him. He thought of the man who had been executed, his courage igniting a flicker of hope within him, a desire to be more than what he had been. "What if I want to help?" he asked, his voice gaining strength. "What if I want to be one of those who stands firm?" Ignatius smiled, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Then begin by embracing your fears. You have already taken the first step by being here. But remember, true faith is not about the absence of fear. It's about moving forward despite it." In that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden rays across the temple courtyard, Marcus felt a rush of determination swell within him. He wanted to be a part of this, wanted to stand for his faith, to support Ignatius in his mission, even if it meant facing the lions. He knelt before Ignatius, the cool stone beneath him grounding his resolve. "I vow to support you, to stand with you in this fight, no matter the cost." Ignatius placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder, his grip firm and reassuring. "Then let this be your vow, not just to me, but to Christ. Let your heart be steadfast, and know that courage is a journey we take together." As Marcus rose to his feet, he felt a sense of clarity wash over him. The chains of his past began to loosen, replaced by a burgeoning sense of purpose. Together, they emerged from the courtyard, standing side by side, gazing out over the vibrant city of Antioch. The marketplace was still alive with activity, but a shadow loomed over it now, a reminder of the conflict that lay ahead. Marcus's heart raced with a mixture of fear and determination, knowing that this was only the beginning of his journey. And as the first stars began to twinkle in the night sky, he whispered a prayer, a promise to find the strength within himself to face whatever came next. The world around him felt charged with possibility, and he stood ready to embrace it, no longer a slave to his past, but a disciple on the path of faith. Chapter 2. The Path to Smyrna. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, spilling a warm golden hue across the dusty Roman road. The air was alive with the chorus of waking nature. Chirping birds fluttered through the branches of olive trees, while the soft rustle of leaves danced in the gentle morning breeze. Dew clung to the blades of grass like tiny jewels, and the scent of wild thyme mingled with the earthy aroma of the worn path. It was a tranquil moment, yet beneath the surface lay a tension as palpable as the warmth of the sun. Marcus knelt beside the campfire, coaxing the last embers into a flicker of flame. His fingers trembled slightly, the remnants of a restless night etched into his brow. Ignatius of Antioch, the revered bishop, was already seated on a weathered log, his grey hair catching the light like a halo. He radiated a quiet strength, his deep-set brown eyes filled with compassion as he observed Marcus. "Come, Marcus," Ignatius said, his voice soft yet firm. "Let us begin the day with a prayer." Marcus nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. The thought of their journey to Smyrna weighed heavily on him, a dark cloud looming over the promise of freedom. As he joined Ignatius, he felt the warmth of the fire at his back, a small comfort, against the chill of uncertainty. "Lord, grant us courage as we journey forth," Ignatius intoned, his hands clasped before him in earnest supplication. "Guide our steps and protect us from the trials ahead. May we be vessels of your love, even in the face of persecution." "Amen," Marcus whispered, the word escaping his lips like a fragile moth taking flight. With the prayer hanging in the air, they gathered their meager belongings, the weight of their purpose anchoring them as they prepared to set out. Ignatius, ever the beacon of hope, moved with a gentle purpose, while Marcus's heart raced with apprehension. The road to Smyrna was fraught with dangers, and whispers of persecution had spread like wildfire among the faithful. Lucius Varro, the centurion assigned to escort them, stood nearby, his muscular frame silhouetted against the rising sun. The scar that cut across his stern face told tales of battles fought and won, but today it seemed to deepen his solemnity. He had been given orders to ensure the prisoner's safe passage, but Marcus had seen the flicker of doubt in Varro's eyes, a flicker that both unsettled and intrigued him. "Ready." Varro's voice was gruff, the authority of a soldier ringing clear. "As ready as we can be," Marcus replied, forcing a calmness he did not feel. Ignatius placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder, grounding him in the moment. "Fear not, young one," Ignatius said quietly. "The path of faith is never without its challenges. Remember, we carry the light of Christ within us." As they walked, the road stretched ahead like a serpent, winding through fields of golden wheat swaying gently in the breeze. The distant hills rolled like waves, their peaks kissed by the soft clouds that drifted lazily across the expanse of sky. The sun climbed higher, illuminating the landscape, and though beauty surrounded them, Marcus's heart was heavy. "What if they come for us?" Marcus asked, voice trembling slightly. "What if?" "I have seen many trials," Ignatius interjected gently, his gaze steady. "The faithful endure. We are like wheat for the lions, nourished by our faith even as we are tested." "Is that not a cruel fate?" Marcus questioned, his brows furrowing. "To be fed to beasts for the amusement of the empire? The world may see it as cruel, but our sacrifice is not in vain," Ignatius replied, his voice calm. "Each martyr brings us closer to the kingdom of heaven. We must not lose sight of our purpose." The conversation hung heavy between them, a tapestry woven with threads of hope and despair. As they continued their journey, the rhythmic crunch of gravel underfoot and the distant sounds of life, carts rattling, villagers calling to one another, formed a backdrop to their thoughts. Before long, they encountered a group of fellow Christians making their way to Smyrna. The ragtag assembly was a mix of men and women, their faces lined with worry but their spirits unyielding. Among them was Maria, a brave woman who had lost her husband to the empire's wrath. "Brother Ignatius," she called, her voice breaking the air like a burst of sunlight. "Have you heard the news? They are arresting anyone who speaks in favor of the Christ. Just yesterday, my neighbor was taken." "Maria, I am sorry to hear that," Ignatius said, his expression earnest. "We must remain steadfast. Our faith is our armor." "But how long can we endure?" she pressed, her eyes darting toward Marcus, searching for hope. "How many more will be lost?" Marcus felt the weight of her gaze, the desperation in her plea stirring something deep within him. "We must stand together," he said, surprising himself. "If we are united, they cannot break us." "Wise words," Varro murmured, his tone laced with an unexpected softness. The centurion's brow furrowed, and Marcus sensed the internal struggle within him, a conflict between duty and the growing empathy he felt for the Christians. As they exchanged stories of bravery and loss, the bond among them grew stronger, but the specter of danger loomed ever closer. The group shared laughter tinged with sorrow, and Marcus found solace in their camaraderie. Yet, with each tale of persecution, his resolve wavered. The sun was high when they found a shaded grove, a respite from the heat that had begun to bear down upon them. As they settled beneath the broad canopy of an ancient oak, the sounds of the forest enveloped them, a symphony of chirps and rustles intermingled with the distant murmur of the road. But peace was short-lived. Soon, the sharp sound of hooves echoed through the trees, and Marcus's heart raced at the sight of Roman officials approaching. Clad in the telltale armor of authority, they rode with an air of menace, the sun gleaming off their polished helmets. "What business do you have here?" the lead official barked, dismounting with a flourish that drew the attention of the entire grove. His eyes narrowed as he surveyed the gathered Christians, suspicion etched into his features. "Traveling to Smyrna," Varro answered, his voice steady, though Marcus could sense the tension in his stance. "Identification," the official commanded, his voice sharp like the crack of a whip. "You there, the bishop. Step forward." Ignoring the knot of anxiety tightening in his stomach, Ignatius rose, his demeanor calm and resolute. "I am Ignatius of Antioch, servant of Christ and bishop of the faithful." "Ah, the martyr," the official smirked, a glimmer of malice in his eyes. "What a fine catch. You think you can spread your heresies unchallenged. Heretical to some, but truth to others." Ignatius replied evenly, his voice unwavering. "I do not seek confrontation, but rather the peace of God among all people." "Peace?" the official scoffed. "You seek to undermine the empire. You would see our order crumble." The air crackled with tension as the Christians exchanged worried glances. Marcus felt the urge to step forward, to defend Ignatius, but fear rooted him to the spot. It was Varro who moved, stepping between Ignatius and the official, his expression a mix of authority and empathy. "Enough," Varro said, his voice low but commanding. "These people are under my protection. They have committed no crime. Your loyalty is to Rome, Varro," the official spat, his face contorting with anger. "You would defend these traitors?" "Loyalty does not mean blind obedience," Varro countered, his voice steady. "I have seen the strength of their faith, and it is not my place to judge. They seek only to travel." The official hesitated, his anger tempered by surprise. The moment stretched, a fragile truce hanging in the air, and Marcus watched the centurion grapple with his own internal conflict. Duty versus humanity. Very well, the official relented, though his voice dripped with disdain. But know this, your leniency will not go unnoticed, Varro. The Empire's patience wears thin. With a dismissive wave, the officials departed, leaving an air of unease in their wake. As silence fell over the grove, Marcus felt a mix of gratitude and confusion towards Varro. He wanted to confront the centurion, to demand how he could serve a system that oppressed so many, but the words caught in his throat. "Why did you intervene?" Marcus finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Varro turned to him, the weight of the question evident in his eyes. "I do not see them as enemies," he confessed, his voice low and contemplative. "I am a soldier, yes, but my heart is not devoid of compassion. I question the Empire's righteousness." "Yet you serve them," Marcus pressed, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "How can you reconcile that?" "Loyalty is complicated," Varro replied, his gaze steady, revealing a glimpse of the man beneath the armor. "I am bound by duty, but I am not blind to the suffering it causes. I see you, Marcus. I see the light of your faith. It stirs something within me." A silence enveloped them, thick with unspoken understanding. In that moment, Marcus began to see Varro not as an enemy, but as a man caught in the storm of conflicting loyalties, a man who wrestled with the weight of his choices. As they resumed their journey, the sun began its descent, casting long shadows on the road ahead. Ignatius walked beside Marcus, his presence a comforting balm. "Do not lose heart," Ignatius encouraged, his voice steady as they stepped back onto the path. "In every trial, God reveals our strength. Your faith will be tested, but it will also be your greatest ally." Marcus nodded, reflecting on the day's events. He felt a growing determination within him, a resolve to embrace his identity as a Christian even in the face of fear. They climbed a ridge overlooking the sea, the sun painting the water in hues of orange and crimson. "Look," Ignatius said, gesturing toward the horizon. "The sea is vast, yet it flows toward the shore. So too shall our faith reach others, no matter the obstacles." "I wish to be strong like you," Marcus admitted, his voice filled with yearning. "But I fear my doubts will betray me." "Doubt is the seed of faith," Ignatius replied, his eyes filled with wisdom. "To doubt is to seek understanding, and understanding leads to strength. Remember, we are not alone. We stand with the faithful." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Marcus felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but he was no longer merely a slave in the eyes of the Empire. He was a believer, a disciple of Christ, and he would carry that truth into the heart of Smyrna. The distant commotion of the city loomed ahead, a reminder of the challenges yet to come. But with Ignatius beside him and an unexpected ally in Varro, Marcus felt the stirrings of courage blossom within, a courage that would guide him through the trials that awaited them. With the stars beginning to twinkle in the twilight sky, they pressed onward, determined to face whatever lay ahead, united in faith and purpose. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Shadows. The air inside Gaius's home was thick with tension, a palpable weight pressing down on Marcus's shoulders as he entered the dimly lit chamber. The merchant's modest abode was a labyrinth of shelves crammed with barrels of spices and jars of preserved fruits, the scents mingling into a heady mixture that made Marcus's stomach churn with anxiety. The flickering oil lamps cast long shadows that danced along the walls, creating an atmosphere of secrecy and urgency. "Keep your voice low," Gaius whispered, his eyes darting toward the door as if expecting the very walls to betray them. He gestured for them to follow, leading Marcus, Ignatius, and Lucius Varro through a narrow passageway that twisted into a cellar. The air grew cooler, the scent of damp earth replacing the spices, and Marcus felt a shiver run down his spine. "Is it true, then?" A voice broke the silence, and Marcus turned to see Lydia, a woman with fiery curls and a gaze that burned with passion. "They say the edicts from the governor are harsher than ever. We can't sit idle, hiding in the shadows. We must act." "Easy, Lydia." Ignatius's voice was steady, a calm anchor amidst the storm of emotions swirling around them. "Fear spreads like wildfire, but we must not let it consume us. We are called to be a light, even in darkness." Marcus watched as Lydia clenched her fists, her brow furrowing. "A light won't save us from the lions, Ignatius. The empire won't stop until we are extinguished." The murmurs of agreement from the assembled Christians filled the cellar, a chorus of fear and doubt. Marcus felt the weight of their gazes upon him, a young man caught between his newfound faith and the reality of the perilous world outside. "Silence!" Varro's voice, deep and commanding, cut through the murmurs. "The more we speak of rebellion, the more we invite the wrath of the authorities. Our strength lies in unity, not in confrontation." He turned to Ignatius, seeking reassurance. Ignatius nodded, his expression serene. "We are not called to insurrection, but to endurance. Remember the martyrs, those who faced torture and death with unwavering faith. They are our examples, and their courage is what we must embody now." The group fell silent, the flickering lamps casting their shadows against the stone walls like phantoms of the past. Marcus felt a surge of emotion. He had longed for a sense of purpose, and here it was, woven into the very fabric of their gathering. "Tell us a story, Ignatius," one of the older men implored, his voice trembling slightly. "A story of a martyr who stood firm in their faith." With a gentle smile, Ignatius began, his voice rich and warm. "There was a man, Polycarp, a leader in our church. When ordered to renounce his faith, he was brought before the proconsul. 86 years I have served Christ," he declared, "and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me?" The room hung on Ignatius's every word, hearts swelling with hope and resolve. Polycarp was burned alive, yet he sang hymns of praise as the flames engulfed him. He was a true witness of Christ, and we must carry his spirit within us. As Ignatius spoke, Marcus felt the flicker of faith ignite within him, a flame that pushed back against the encroaching darkness. He thought of his own journey, the nights spent in isolation, yearning for belonging. This was it. This was where he belonged. But just as the weight of the moment began to settle, a loud banging echoed from above, shaking the cellar walls. "Open up! This is Quintus of the Praetorian Guard." The voice was sharp, filled with authority and menace. Panic erupted in the cellar. Marcus's heart raced as the group scrambled to hide. Ignatius remained calm, his voice a steadying force. "Stay quiet. We must not show fear." Gaius moved swiftly, pointing to a narrow opening behind a stack of barrels. "There. Quick." Marcus squeezed through the opening, followed by Varro, who ushered Lydia and the others after him. Ignatius, the last to go, offered a silent prayer, his hands clasped in faith. They huddled in the cramped space, the air thick with the scent of spices and fear. The banging grew louder, punctuated by shouts of anger from Quintus and his men. "We know you're down there. Come out, and no one will be harmed." "Lies," Lydia muttered, trembling. "They'll throw us to the lions." "Hush," Varro whispered, his eyes scanning the shadows. "We will not go quietly." Marcus could feel his pulse in his throat, a steady drumbeat of dread. He had never seen violence, never felt the sting of betrayal so close. The very foundation of his new faith felt like sand beneath his feet, shifting and uncertain. "Keep your heads," Ignatius urged, his voice unwavering. "We will not abandon our purpose. Remember, we are stronger together." As the door creaked open, revealing the silhouettes of armed guards, Marcus's heart raced. He glanced at Varro, who was poised to defend them, muscles tense, ready to spring into action. "Search the place," Quintus barked, stepping into the dim light. His face was hard, eyes narrowed in anger. "We know they're here. We've received word of your insurrection." Marcus's breath caught in his throat. Insurrection? The word felt heavy, a shroud over their gathering. Ignatius's gaze met his, a silent reassurance that they would endure whatever came next. Before the guards could move deeper, Varro sprang into action, his soldiers' instincts kicking in. "This way!" He nudged Marcus and Lydia toward a narrow staircase at the back of the cellar, leading them upward toward the street. "Go now!" The group bolted, their breaths quickening as they ascended the stairs. Marcus glanced back to see Ignatius, unwavering in his faith, still praying even as the guards advanced. "Go!" Varro urged, his voice sharp. "We must get to safety." They burst out into the cool night air, the moonlight bathing the streets of Smyrna in a silvery glow. Marcus's mind raced as they skidded to a halt, the narrow streets twisting like a labyrinth before them. "Where to?" Lydia gasped, her curls bouncing as she turned to Varro. "Follow me." Varro led them into the narrow alleys, where shadows loomed like specters. The clamor of the guards' footsteps echoed behind them, a relentless reminder of the danger at their heels. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest, a wild thrum of fear and adrenaline. As they rounded a corner, they encountered a high wall, its rough stones looming ominously. "We need to scale this," Varro said, eyeing the wall critically. "Are you mad?" Lydia exclaimed, glancing back at the approaching guards. "Trust me," Varro replied, determination etched across his face. "I'll boost you up, then I'll follow. You can help Ignatius." With a nod, they formed a chain. Lydia climbed first, her hands grasping the rough stones as Varro hoisted her up. Marcus moved next, feeling Varro's strong hands propel him upward. He reached for Lydia, who pulled him up, their breaths mingling with the night air. "Come on," Varro urged, scrambling up the wall after them. "We can't stop." As he reached the top, the sound of shouting grew closer. "There they are!" Quintus's voice rang out, a cry of rage that sent a chill down Marcus's spine. "We're not safe yet," Lydia said, her eyes wide with fear. "What now?" "Over the edge." Varro pointed to the other side. "Just drop down. We'll find cover." With a nod, they scrambled over, each of them landing with soft thuds on the ground below. They ducked into a narrow alley, the walls closing in around them, cloaking them in darkness. Marcus felt the adrenaline begin to ebb, replaced by a heavy weight of reality. They had escaped, but at what cost? The fear of discovery gnawed at him, and he looked to Varro and Lydia, who both wore expressions of disbelief and relief. "Are we safe?" he asked, panting. "For now," Varro replied, peering around the corner. "But we must keep moving. They won't stop searching." As they caught their breath, Marcus's mind swirled with thoughts of Ignatius, left behind. "We have to go back for him," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. Varro shook his head. "We cannot. If they find us, they will find him too. We must regroup and plan." The weight of that truth settled heavily on Marcus's heart. In that moment, he realized the cost of faith. It was not merely a belief, but a commitment to endure suffering, to face danger head-on. As they moved through the darkened streets, the reality of their mission loomed over him like a storm cloud. They were not just fleeing for their lives. They were part of something far greater. They were the whispers in the shadows, the flickers of hope in a world determined to extinguish them. "Keep your faith," Varro said quietly, as if sensing Marcus's turmoil. "We will see Ignatius again." Marcus nodded, but the uncertainty clung to him like the shadows around them. With every step, he felt the gravity of their mission deepening, a path set before him that would test his resolve in ways he could not yet imagine. As they slipped deeper into the night, Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. The journey ahead was fraught with peril, but it was also filled with purpose, and he was determined to see it through. Chapter 4. Chapter 4. The Storm of Troas. Chapter 4. The Storm of Troas, the small merchant ship, the Starling, rocked violently on the churning waters of the Aegean Sea. Ominous clouds gathered overhead, darkening the horizon with a thick, oppressive grey. The wind howled through the rigging, a mournful sound that matched the rising panic among the crew. Seagulls, once soaring freely, now screeched as they battled the gusts, their cries lost in the chaos. Marcus leaned against the deck's railing, gripping the wood tightly as another wave crashed over the side, soaking him. He turned his wide hazel eyes toward Ignatius, who stood resolutely at the ship's stern, his grey hair whipping around his weathered face. The bishop's calmness in the face of the storm only amplified Marcus's mounting fear. "Pray for us, Saint Ignatius," Marcus shouted over the din, his voice barely carrying through the tempest. "What hope is there against such fury?" Ignatius, his deep-set brown eyes reflecting a steady resolve, clasped his hands together in prayer. "Hope is a steadfast anchor, my son," he replied. "Even the mightiest storms must yield to the will of the Almighty. Let us not surrender to fear, but find strength in faith." As the ship lurched again, Marcus felt the bile rise in his throat. He had faced many hardships in his short life, but this fearsome tempest, felt insurmountable. He glanced toward Varro, who was shouting orders to the crew, his muscular frame silhouetted against the darkening sky. The centurion's authority was palpable, his voice booming as he commanded the men to secure the sails and brace themselves against the waves. "Hold fast, you dogs," Varro barked, his stern face set like stone. "We'll not be swallowed by Poseidon this day. Secure that line. Move. Move." Marcus watched as the crew scrambled, drenched and desperate, each man's face a mask of determination and fear. It was a chaotic ballet of survival, the kind that could turn from grace to disaster in an instant. Varro's presence inspired a flicker of hope in Marcus, though it was quickly extinguished by another violent plunge of the ship. "Marcus!" Varro shouted, catching his attention. "Come help me with that sail. We need to reduce the rigging before she capsizes." With a nod, Marcus tore himself away from Ignatius's calm, feeling a strange mix of trepidation and purpose. He sprinted toward the mast, where Varro was already straining against the ropes. The ship tilted dangerously, and Marcus stumbled but quickly regained his footing, heart racing. "Grab that line," Varro instructed, his gaze fixed on the tumultuous sea. "We can't let it fly free." Marcus reached for the loose sail, his fingers fumbling as the wind whipped around them. As he helped Varro secure it, he felt a kinship form in the chaos. "You've sailed through storms before?" he asked, trying to distract himself from the terror of the moment. Varro grunted, pulling the rope with all his might. "Once, we were caught off the coast of Syracuse. The waves were as high as the walls of Rome, and I thought we would surely meet the deep. But we survived, and it taught me to respect the sea." "Did you fear?" Marcus pressed, his voice steadying as he focused on their task. "Fear is a companion, boy," Varro said, his eyes narrowed against the spray. "It can either anchor you to despair or drive you to fight. Choose wisely." With a sudden jolt, the ship lurched, throwing Marcus against Varro. The centurion steadied him with a firm grip. "Hold fast," Varro shouted, his voice a lifeline in the tumult. "We are not done yet." The storm raged on, waves crashing like thunder, each one threatening to take them down. As they secured the sail, a massive wave struck the side of the ship, and for a heart-stopping moment, the vessel tilted precariously. Marcus felt the ship's deck slip beneath him, the roar of the sea filling his ears. "Pray, Marcus." Ignatius's voice cut through the chaos, calm and resolute. "Let your heart be anchored in faith." In that moment, a rush of warmth enveloped Marcus. He closed his eyes, letting Ignatius's words wash over him. "Lord," he whispered fervently, "give us strength, deliver us from this storm." As if in response, the winds began to shift, slowly at first, then with greater intensity. The clouds overhead started to break apart, allowing slivers of sunlight to pierce through. The crew, sensing a change, redoubled their efforts. Varro's commands rang out with renewed vigor, as if the very heavens had breathed life into them. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours, but finally, the tumult began to relent. The ship righted itself, and the waves, though still fierce, began to lose their ferocity. As the storm passed, an eerie calm settled over the sea, the dark clouds parting to reveal a breathtaking sunset. Hues of orange and gold danced across the water, painting a scene of almost surreal beauty. Exhausted but alive, Marcus leaned against the mast, breathing heavily. Varro, equally worn, wiped the salt and water from his brow, allowing a small grin to break through his usual stoicism. "We live to fight another day," he said, breathless but triumphant. "Thanks to your strength, Varro," Marcus replied, a newfound respect for the centurion blooming within him. I couldn't have done it without you." "Then let us not forget this," Varro said, his eyes glinting with a warmth that belied his hardened exterior. "In storms, we find the metal of our spirit. You showed courage today, Marcus. That is worth remembering." As the three of them gathered at the stern, Ignatius raised his hands, inviting them into a moment of gratitude. "Let us give thanks," he said, his voice steady and inviting, "for the storm has passed, and we have been spared." Marcus joined in, feeling a swell of faith that had been shaky only hours before. As they prayed, he felt a connection form not just with Ignatius, but with Varro as well. The storm had forged a bond between them, a shared experience that transcended their differences. When they finished, Mark's gaze drifted toward the distant shore of Troas, where the outlines of ancient buildings began to emerge against the fading light. "We are almost there," he said, feeling a renewed sense of purpose swell within him. "What do we do next?" Varro regarded the shore, his expression thoughtful. "We will meet with the local leaders, assess the situation. But keep your eyes open, Marcus. The world is not as welcoming as it once was." As they approached the dock, a group of figures emerged from the shadows, standing solemnly at the water's edge. Their clothing was tattered, and their faces bore the marks of hardship, but their eyes shone with an unwavering light. "Exiled Christians," Ignatius murmured, his expression softening. "We must hear their stories and listen to their faith." As they disembarked, Marcus felt an electric thrill course through him. Each step toward these exiles felt like a step toward understanding a greater purpose, his heart racing at the prospect of deepening his faith amidst those who had endured so much for it. "Your spirit is strong," one of the exiled men said as they approached, his voice steady despite the weariness etched into his features. "We have much to share, and even more to learn from you." Marcus exchanged a glance with Varro, who was watching intently, his brow furrowed. The centurion's internal conflict was palpable, and Marcus could sense the shift within him, a growing empathy for the very people he had been trained to suppress. "Then let us share our stories," Ignatius said, stepping forward with open arms. For in our stories, we find the strength to endure. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world into twilight, Marcus felt a surge of hope, a newfound determination to spread the message of love and resilience he had witnessed. The storm had not just been a test of survival. It had been a crucible that forged their bonds, ignited their faith, and prepared them for the challenges that lay ahead in Troas. And as they gathered with the exiled Christians, Marcus realized that he was no longer merely a servant. He was becoming part of something far greater than himself, a movement fueled by love, faith, and an indomitable spirit. The journey ahead was uncertain, but together, they would face whatever came with courage born of shared adversity. Hashtag chapter 5, chapter 5. A crossroads of faith. Hashtag chapter 5. A crossroads of faith. The flickering light of oil lamps cast a warm glow across the dimly lit room of the merchant's home, illuminating the anxious faces of the gathered Christians. The air was thick with tension, a palpable anticipation mingling with the scent of olive oil and the musty aroma of old wood. Shadows danced on the walls, creating fleeting images of hope and despair, as if the very room held its breath, awaiting the words of Ignatius. At the center of the gathering stood Ignatius of Antioch, his stout figure radiating calm amidst the storm of uncertainty. His gray hair and long beard framed a weathered face, deep-set brown eyes twinkling with a fierce yet compassionate light. He was a man forged by trials, an unwavering pillar of faith who had witnessed both the beauty and brutality of the world. "Brothers and sisters," Ignatius began, his voice steady and resonant, "we find ourselves in perilous times. The empire seeks to extinguish the light of our faith. But remember, it is within the shadows that the light shines the brightest." Marcus stood among them, his heart racing as he absorbed every word. The weight of fear settled in his stomach, yet alongside it surged a growing ember of courage. He had spent months in Ignatius's company and had marveled at the man's unwavering conviction. Tonight, however, felt different, charged with a sense of inevitability that stirred something deep within him. Scripture teaches us that suffering is but a moment, a fleeting trial that leads to eternal glory. Ignatius continued, his gaze sweeping over the gathered believers. "We are called to be steadfast, to be as wheat for the lions, nourishing the faith that cannot be taken from us." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly, punctuated by a few whispered prayers. Marcus felt a swell of emotion, a mixture of fear and inspiration that made his hands tremble. He had witnessed the persecution of his fellow believers, their faith tested like gold in fire, and yet here they stood, united in purpose. As Ignatius spoke, Marcus's thoughts wandered to Lucius Varro, the centurion who had been assigned to escort the Christians to their trials. Varro's stern features often haunted Marcus's dreams, a reminder of the empire's oppressive hand. Yet, there was something in Varro's eyes, something that hinted at an internal struggle. The meeting progressed, each passing moment solidifying the resolve within Marcus. Ignatius's words were not just a call to endure. They were a challenge to rise above the fear and embrace the faith that had become his lifeline. After the gathering, the Christians began to disperse, their faces still illuminated by the afterglow of Ignatius's message. Marcus lingered in the doorway, his mind racing with thoughts. He stepped into the cool night air, the stars twinkling above like the distant hopes of those who dared to believe. "Marcus!" a voice called, breaking through the stillness. He turned to see Varro approaching, the moonlight casting sharp shadows across his stern face. "Centurion," Marcus replied, the tension palpable as their eyes met. "What brings you here?" "Duty," Varro said, folding his arms across his chest. "I must ask what you were doing inside." "The authorities grow restless." "Praying," Marcus replied, the conviction in his voice surprising even himself. "Praying for the courage to stand against this persecution." Varro's brow furrowed, and for a moment He seemed lost in thought. "You put yourself at risk, boy. You know what they do to those who defy the Empire. And yet they cannot take my faith," Marcus shot back, emboldened by the gathering spirit. "What is loyalty, Lucius, if it demands the sacrifice of one's humanity?" Varro stepped closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You speak of humanity as if it can withstand the weight of an empire. I have seen what they do to those who openly defy Rome." Marcus took a step forward, his heart pounding. "And I have seen what it means to be truly human, what it means to love and serve others, even in the face of death. Can you not see that loyalty to the Empire should not blind us to compassion?" The centurion's gaze hardened, yet Marcus sensed a flicker of doubt in his eyes. "You presume much, boy. The Empire is all I have known, all I have fought for. Loyalty is my duty. But duty to what end?" Marcus pressed, urgency spilling into his voice. "To watch innocents suffer? To enforce laws that strip away dignity? Is that the legacy you wish to uphold?" Varro's expression shifted, a crack in his stoic demeanor. "You are brave, Marcus, but bravery does not shield you from the consequences of your words." Before Marcus could respond, a sudden commotion erupted from the alleyway. Shouts echoed off the stone walls, the sound of hurried footsteps growing louder. A chill raced down Marcus's spine as he recognized the voices of local authorities, their fervent zeal in pursuit of the Christians. "Run!" Varro commanded, instinctively pulling Marcus toward the shadows. They dashed to the side of the building, pressing their backs against the cool stone as the chaos unfolded. "Search the place," a voice barked, filled with fury. "They cannot hide from the will of the Empire." Ignatius, still inside, remained calm, urging his fellow believers to stay resolute. "Stand firm, my children. We are not alone." The sound of breaking glass and splintering would fill the air as the authorities burst into the merchant's home. Marcus's heart raced, the fear of discovery mingling with the resolve Ignatius had instilled in him. "Stay close," Varro whispered, his voice low and serious. He glanced down the alley, gauging their escape route. "We must find a way to help them. What can we do?" Marcus breathed, fear prickling at the edges of his courage. "Follow me," Varro said, taking Marcus's arm and leading him into the shadows of the alley. They moved swiftly, ducking behind barrels and crates, the moonlight guiding their path like a beacon of hope. As they rounded a corner, a figure emerged from the darkness, a young woman with wild eyes and disheveled hair. "They're coming," she gasped, breathless. "They've already seized a few. We need to hide." Varro's gaze shifted to Marcus, an unspoken understanding passing between them. "We can't leave them," Marcus insisted, his voice trembling with urgency. "Fighting them will lead to our own capture." Varro snapped, his military training battling against the compassion he felt. "We must regroup, find a safe place. Please, there has to be something we can do," Marcus pleaded, desperation clawing at his heart. Before Varro could respond, a loud crash rang out from the merchant's home, followed by the terrified cries of the Christians. Ignatius's voice rose above the clamor, urging his followers to remain steadfast. "Run!" Varro finally relented, steering Marcus and the young woman down the alley. "We'll find a way back. I promise." They raced through the narrow passageways of Troas, the sounds of chaos echoing behind them. The moon hung high in the sky, illuminating their desperate flight as they ducked into a nearby cave, its entrance concealed by thick foliage. Inside, the damp air enveloped them, the distant sounds of the waves crashing against the shore echoing in the darkness. Varro's breathing slowed as he leaned against the cool stone wall, his face a mask of conflict. "Why do you do this?" he whispered, looking at Marcus. "Why risk everything for a faith that could lead to your death?" Marcus's heart raced, and he felt Ignatius's teachings stir within him. "Because I believe in something greater than myself. I believe in love, in compassion. I cannot stand idly by while innocents suffer." As they caught their breath, Ignatius's calming presence filled the cave. He stepped forward, his eyes locking onto Marcus's. "In trials, we are called to be wheat for the lions. Our faith may lead us into the jaws of danger, but it is in those moments that we find our true purpose." Marcus nodded, the weight of Ignatius's words resonating deeply within him. He had witnessed the power of faith amidst suffering, and now he felt the stirrings of a deeper conviction. Varro's expression shifted, uncertainty etched across his features. "And what if that faith leads to your death?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Then I will die with honor," Marcus replied, the firmness in his voice surprising even him. "I would rather stand for my beliefs than cower in the shadows." A heavy silence fell over the cave, the gravity of their situation hanging thick in the air. Varro's brow furrowed, his internal conflict evident. "And what about me? Am I to stand by as both an enforcer of the empire and a witness to this?" Ignatius stepped closer, placing a hand on Varro's shoulder. "Every man must choose his path, Lucius. Often, it is in the face of adversity that we discover who we truly are." Marcus watched as Varro's stern facade cracked, revealing the vulnerability beneath. "You think me unworthy of redemption?" Varro asked, his voice quivering with uncertainty. "Not unworthy," Ignatius replied gently, "but your heart must guide your actions. Reflect on the humanity you see before you, in the faces of those you serve and those you pursue." As the waves echoed in the distance, Marcus felt a sense of unity forming between them, a fragile thread binding their fates together. In that dark cave, as they faced the unknown, the weight of their choices loomed larger than any empire. Ignatius's words hung in the air, a promise of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. "We will endure, and in our endurance, we will find strength." And with that, they sat in the dim light of the cave, the sound of the world outside fading into the background, each contemplating the paths that lay ahead. A crossroads of faith had emerged, and soon, they would have to choose which way to turn. Chapter 6. Chapter 6. The Lion's Den. Chapter 6. The Lion's Den. The room was cloaked in shadows, the flickering flames of oil lamps casting a dim light that danced across the walls, revealing the rich textures of the governor's residence in Troas. The scent of burnt oil mingled with the musky aroma of old parchment, and the musty air clung to Marcus's skin like a damp cloak. He and Ignatius sat at a small wooden table, poring over maps that detailed their perilous route to Rome. The parchment was worn and yellowed, frayed at the edges from many hands tracing the paths that wound through the empire. "Here," Marcus said, his finger hovering over a line that snaked through a forested area. "If we take the road through the hills of Phrygia, we can avoid the main routes and the Roman patrols." Ignatius leaned closer, his wise, deep-set brown eyes narrowing as he studied the map. "It is wise to avoid the eyes of the empire, but remember, Marcus, the roads of Phrygia are treacherous. We may encounter bandits, or worse. Better than being captured by Gaius Flavius's guards," Marcus replied, a hint of tremor in his voice. The very mention of the governor sent a chill through him, an oppressive weight that hung heavy in the air. Lucius Varro stood by the entrance, his muscular build silhouetted against the fading light of the corridor. His stern face, marked by a prominent scar, was taut with tension as he scanned the surroundings, his centurion instincts in overdrive. "We must be cautious. The governor is not one to let dissent go unpunished." Just as Marcus opened his mouth to respond, a loud knock reverberated through the room, startling them. The sound echoed like a war drum, and Marcus felt his heart leap into his throat. "Hide the map," Varro hissed, urgency lacing his words. With swift hands, they shoved the parchment into a hollow space beneath the table, Marcus's fingers trembling as he did so. He glanced at Ignatius, who remained unflinching, a resolute calm enveloping him like a cloak. "Stay close," Ignatius murmured, his voice a steady anchor amid the rising tide of fear. The door burst open, and Gaius Flavius strode in, flanked by 2 guards, their armor glinting ominously in the lamplight. The governor was a tall, imposing figure, radiating authority and disdain, his toga swirling around him like storm clouds. His eyes, sharp and calculating, fell upon Ignatius with a predatory glint. "Bishop Ignatius," Gaius boomed, his voice echoing like thunder in the small room. "What treasonous plots are you concocting here?" "I plot only for peace, Governor," Ignatius replied, his tone unwavering. "The only rebellion I seek is against despair." "Despair?" Gaius sneered, stepping closer, his guards fanning out. "Your faith is a poison to the empire. You preach of a king who died a criminal's death, yet you would have the people follow you into madness. You think your words can shield you from the might of Rome." Ignatius met the governor's gaze, his calm demeanor only fueling Gaius's rage. "It is not I who sought madness, but the empire that chooses violence over faith. I offer hope, Gaius, a path to salvation beyond the sword." The governor's face twisted in fury, and he stepped forward, looming over the table. "You speak of salvation as if it is your right to dictate. You will submit to the Roman gods, or you will face the consequences." Marcus felt a sharp intake of breath. He shared a glance with Varro, who had stiffened, his eyes flickering between Ignatius and the guards, wrestling with an internal conflict that was palpable in the air. "Your gods," Ignatius said, his voice steady, "are built on fear. Mine is built on love. I will not bow to tyranny." The room crackled with tension. Gaius's face flushed with rage, and Marcus braced for violence. "You will regret your insolence, Bishop," he spat, turning on his heel. "I will not allow this blasphemy to continue." As the governor stormed out, the door slamming shut behind him, a heavy silence engulfed the room. Marcus felt the weight of the moment settle upon him like a shroud. "Marcus," Varro said, his voice low, "we must move quickly. The governor will not take this lightly." Marcus turned to Ignatius, who remained calm, yet his eyes held a flicker of concern. "What do we do now?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "We prepare," Ignatius replied, his tone resolute. "Fear is a weapon they wield, but we shall not let it conquer our faith. Remember, the strength of the Spirit is greater than the might of the sword." As they gathered their belongings and prepared to flee, Marcus felt a knot in his stomach. I am scared, Ignatius. What if we fail? What if they catch us?" Ignatius placed a comforting hand on Marcus's shoulder, his grip warm and reassuring. "Fear is a natural companion on this journey, my son, but we must not allow it to dictate our choices. I once feared the fire that would cleanse my soul, but I learned to embrace it. It is through the flames that we find our true selves." Marcus swallowed hard, his heart racing. Ignatius's words struck deep, igniting a flicker of courage within him. "You believe that martyrdom is a path to salvation?" "I do," Ignatius said, his gaze unwavering. "But I do not wish for you to follow that path just yet. Your journey is not finished, Marcus. You have much yet to learn, and much to fight for." Before Marcus could respond, they heard the unmistakable sound of boots marching outside. Varro's eyes widened, and he rushed to the window. "They're searching the area." We must leave now." In a flurry, they slipped out of the back door, the cool evening air biting against their skin. The streets of Troas were bustling with traders and citizens, their laughter and chatter a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within Marcus. He felt the weight of his mission pressing down on him like the oppressive heat of the midday sun. "Stay close," Varro commanded, his authoritative tone cutting through the din as he led them through the throng of oblivious citizens. Marcus felt the pulse of the city around him, the vibrant colors of stalls displaying fruits and fabrics, the scent of spices wafting through the air. As they navigated the narrow streets, Marcus glanced up at Varro. "Why are you helping us?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the cacophony. Varro hesitated, his expression hardening. "You think I enjoy this? I am a soldier of Rome. But you," he paused, eyes narrowing as he quickly scanned the crowd, "you have something worth fighting for. I can respect that." Marcus's heart swelled with gratitude, but it was short-lived as a shout echoed behind them. "There! The Christians!" A guard emerged from the crowd, pointing with an accusatory finger. "Run!" Varro barked, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. They dashed into the nearest alleyway, the narrow passageway constricting around them like a vice. The clamor of the marketplace faded, replaced by the pounding of their hearts and the sound of heavy boots thundering behind them. Ignatius led the way, his resolve unwavering, even as the chaos unfolded around them. "Keep moving," he urged, glancing back at Marcus, who struggled to. "Keep pace. Do not lose faith." They burst into a larger street, but the guards were hot on their heels. Varro, with a fierce determination, shouted commands to clear a path. "Step aside, by the authority of Rome." His voice boomed, echoing off the stone walls, and for a moment, the crowd parted, startled by his presence. Marcus felt the heat of anger rise within him as the citizens watched, their expressions a mix of curiosity and fear. "Why do they not help us?" he muttered, frustration spilling over. Ignatius turned to him, his eyes fierce. "Not all are ready to stand against the tide, Marcus. But we must be the ones to lead." As they rushed through the streets, the narrow alleyways of Troas gave way to a bustling square filled with merchants and families. Varro pushed through the crowd, using his authority to part the sea of bodies. "Move aside. A matter of life and death." "Who do you think you are?" a merchant shouted, indignation in his voice. "This is a place of trade, not a battlefield." "Enough!" Varro snapped, his patience wearing thin. "These men are being hunted by the governor's guards. Either you help us, or you condemn yourselves to his wrath." Their escape took on a frantic urgency, limbs moving as if propelled by desperation. They dashed into a narrow side street, which led to a dimly lit alleyway. The walls were adorned with faded murals of Roman gods, their once vibrant colors now dulled by time and neglect. They paused for a moment, catching their breath, the weight of their situation pressing heavily upon them. "What now?" Marcus gasped, leaning against the cool stone of the wall. Ignatius took a deep breath, his expression thoughtful. "We must find refuge. There is an abandoned warehouse near the docks. We can regroup there." Varro nodded, scanning the area for any sign of the guards. "Lead the way, Bishop." The group moved swiftly, their footsteps echoing in the empty alleyways as they made their way toward the docks. The salty air filled Marcus's lungs, a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere of the governor's residence. As they approached the warehouse, Marcus felt an unsettling sense of foreboding. The structure loomed before them, dark and foreboding, its windows boarded up as if it had long been forgotten by the world. Once inside, they collapsed onto the cold, dusty floor, the air thick with the scent of old wood and decay. "We should be safe for the moment," Varro said, his voice low. "But we cannot linger." Marcus looked to Ignatius, who was kneeling in prayer, his brow furrowed in concentration. The sight stirred something deep within him, a longing for faith, for strength in the face of adversity. As Ignatius finished his prayer, he turned to Marcus, his eyes filled with wisdom. "We must prepare ourselves for what lies ahead. The governor will not rest until he sees us silenced. But in the face of adversity, we must remain steadfast." Marcus nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "I am ready," he said, his voice firm with newfound conviction. "I will stand with you, Ignatius." Varro watched the exchange, an unreadable expression on his face. "And what of you, Lucius? Will you stand with them?" he asked, addressing himself more than the centurion. Varro shifted uncomfortably, his eyes darting away from Marcus and Ignatius. "I have my duty to the empire, but—" He hesitated, his voice faltering. "Perhaps there is more at stake than just loyalty." The words hung in the air, laden with the weight of unspoken conflict. Marcus felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. "Together we can change things," he said, his resolve solidifying. Ignatius nodded, a proud smile breaking across his weathered face. "Faith is a force that can shift mountains, Marcus, and with your courage, we shall face whatever comes next." As they settled into the warehouse, the shadows deepening around them, Marcus clutched the talisman Ignatius had given him, feeling the cool metal against his palm. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder of the faith they fought for. The storm was far from over, but with Ignatius by his side and Varro's reluctant support, Marcus felt a newfound determination building within him. He would stand firm in his faith, even in the face of the lion's den. And as the echoes of the past collided with the promise of the future, he understood that his journey was just beginning. The chapter ended, but the journey was far from over. The shadows loomed large, but Marcus's heart burned brightly with the flame of faith, illuminating the path ahead. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. The road to Rome. Chapter 7. The road to Rome. The sun climbed slowly over the rugged peaks of the Apennines, casting elongated shadows that stretched like dark fingers across the rocky path. The air was crisp, a coolness that clung to the earth, yet the promise of warmth lingered in the brightening sky. Despite the beauty of the landscape, a tension wove through the morning mist, settling heavily on the shoulders of Marcus as he trailed slightly behind Ignatius and Varro. The path was narrow, bordered by craggy rocks and tufts of wild thyme that released their sharp, earthy scent with each step they took. Marcus's eyes darted to the steep drops on either side, his heart racing with the sound of his own breath. Ignatius, ahead, walked with a serene grace, undeterred by the peril that lay ahead. Varro moved with purpose, his muscular frame tense, eyes scanning the horizon as if it could provide warning of the dangers that stalked them. "Keep your eyes sharp, Marcus." Varro's voice broke through the silence, direct and authoritative. "The Romans are restless. I've seen the way they patrol these parts." "Yes," Marcus replied, forcing himself to keep pace. "But do we have to keep moving? Surely, we could find a safer place to rest for a moment." His voice carried the weight of his unease, his thoughts a swirling tempest of fear and doubt. "We are closer to Rome than we were yesterday," Ignatius said, turning slightly, a reassuring smile playing at the corners of his lips. "And every step forward brings us nearer to our purpose. Fear is a shackle, my friend. Let it fall away." "Easier said than done," Marcus muttered, his gaze cast down, the path uneven beneath his feet. He admired Ignatius's unwavering faith, yet the concept of martyrdom gnawed at him, a dark, foreboding spectre that loomed over their journey. As they rounded a bend, the path narrowed further, and they paused to catch their breath. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and pine, a brief respite from the tension that suffocated them. It was then they encountered a lone traveler, a weathered man whose appearance bore the marks of hardship. His cloak, tattered and stained, hung loosely from his shoulders, and his face was etched with lines of worry. "Travelers," he called, his voice hoarse yet urgent, "you tread dangerous ground. I've seen the soldiers just beyond the ridge, searching for Christians." Marcus's heart sank, a cold wave of fear washing over him. "How many?" he asked, stepping closer. "5 or 6, perhaps more," the traveler replied, eyes wide with the gravity of his warning. "They are relentless. I witnessed the execution of 2 men just last week. They are hunting for those who dare to defy the empire." Varro moved protectively in front of Ignatius and Marcus, his posture tense, hands resting on the hilt of his sword. "We need to change course," he said, scanning the rocky outcrop for alternative routes. "There must be another way." Ignatius placed a calming hand on Varro's arm. "And yet, we cannot let fear dictate our path. We are not running from the truth, but toward it. These dangers are but shadows in the light of faith." Marcus clenched his fists, feeling the weight of Ignatius's words. "But what if being brave leads us to death? What if we're caught? Then we die as we live in faith," Ignatius countered, his voice steady, as if he had already contemplated the worst. "We must act with purpose, not fear." The traveler nodded, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "There are many who would die for their faith, but the road to Rome is fraught with peril, and the empire does not show mercy." With a heavy heart, Marcus turned away from the traveler, the weight of impending martyrdom pressing down on him. "I don't know if I can bear it," he whispered, barely audible. "What if I am not strong enough?" "Strength is not the absence of fear," Ignatius said, his tone warm and comforting. "It is the will to move forward despite it. Remember the parable of the mustard seed." They found a secluded grove just off the path, ancient trees stretching high above them, their leaves whispering secrets in the gentle breeze. Ignatius motioned for them to rest, and they gathered beneath the canopy, the world outside momentarily forgotten. Once, a man planted a mustard seed. Ignatius began, his voice calm, drawing their attention. It was the smallest of seeds, yet when it grew, it became a great tree, sheltering the birds of the air. "Our faith can be like that seed, Marcus. Even amidst the smallest beginnings, great things can flourish." "But what if I am just a weed?" Marcus interjected, frustration rising within him. "What if I never grow?" "You will grow," Varro added, his voice low, yet firm, "if you allow yourself to believe. You've already shown courage by being here, and that is more than many can claim." Marcus looked between the 2 men, uncertainty flickering in his chest. "I fear the day will come when my faith will be tested, and I will falter." Ignatius leaned closer, eyes twinkling with wisdom. "Every man's faith is tested. It is in the trials that we find our true selves. Remember, it is not our strength that earns us favor, but our willingness to trust in something greater than ourselves." The grove felt like a sanctuary, despite the world's dangers lurking just beyond the trees. The 3 men shared a moment of silence, contemplating the strength that came from community, from shared belief. Yet, as they prepared to leave, the tranquility shattered. "Quickly!" Varro hissed, his instincts honed from years of military training. "They're here!" The sound of armored boots echoed through the grove, sharp and jarring. Panic surged as the 3 men scrambled to their feet, the soldiers' voices growing nearer, harsh and demanding. "Search the area!" a soldier shouted. "They cannot have gone far." Varro instinctively positioned himself in front of Ignatius and Marcus, sword drawn, muscles tense. "Stay behind me," he instructed, a protective ferocity igniting within him. "Varro, we mustn't fight," Ignatius urged, his voice calm even in the face of imminent danger. "We must stand firm in our faith, not in arms." Marcus's heart raced, fear clawing at his throat. "What do we do?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "Trust me," Varro said, his gaze locked on the entrance to the grove. "I know a way through the trees." Just as the soldiers broke through the underbrush, Varro gestured for them to follow. "Now," he commanded. They dashed deeper into the grove, branches whipping against their skin as they navigated the dense foliage. The soldiers shouted, their voices a cacophony of confusion, but they pressed on, adrenaline surging through their veins. "Keep moving," Varro urged, his eyes scanning for an escape route. "There's a narrow path up ahead." Marcus felt the rush of fear and exhilaration blend into a single heartbeat, the world around him blurring. They emerged from the thicket onto a steep slope, the sun glaring down as they stumbled forward, breathless and wild. "Over there," Varro pointed to a narrow, overgrown path, hidden from view. "We can lose them there." They hurried toward the path, their hearts pounding in unison. As they veered off the main trail, the sounds of the soldiers faded behind them, swallowed by the dense underbrush. "What now?" Marcus gasped, panting heavily. "Just keep moving," Varro urged, glancing back to ensure they were not followed. "We'll find a place to hide and regroup." Ignatius remained steadfast, his presence a calming anchor. "Remember, we are not alone in this journey. Our faith guides us, even in the darkest moments." As they pressed deeper into the shadows of the overgrown path, Marcus felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. Varro's unwavering resolve and Ignatius's unshakable faith created a bond stronger than the fear that threatened to consume him. They continued along the narrow route, the trees embracing them like old friends. The air was cooler here, a stark contrast to the heat of their earlier flight. Yet, as they paused to catch their breath, a storm brewed on the horizon, dark clouds gathering ominously, mirroring the turmoil within Marcus. "What if we're caught?" he whispered, the fear creeping back into his heart. "What if we don't make it to Rome?" Ignatius placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder, his grip firm. "Then we shall face whatever comes with courage. Remember, the road to Rome is not merely a destination, but a testament to our faith. Whatever awaits us, we shall meet it together." With a renewed sense of purpose, they pressed on, emerging from the dense trees and standing on the edge of a steep cliff. Below, the valley stretched out, bathed in the light of the setting sun, a breathtaking view marred only by the weight of their task ahead. "Look," Varro said, pointing to the distant horizon where the outline of Rome loomed, both a promise and a threat. "We are not far now, but we must remain vigilant." As the first drops of rain began to fall, Marcus looked back toward the darkening sky. The storm was coming, and with it, the trials they would face. But standing beside Ignatius and Varro, he felt something awaken within him, a quiet resolve. The road ahead would be perilous, but together they would weather whatever storm awaited them. They turned towards the dimming light of the sun, a flicker of hope against the gathering clouds, and took their first steps toward Rome, prepared to confront the challenges that lay ahead. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. The Gathering Storm Chapter 8. The Gathering Storm, the dimly lit room, was a sanctuary in the heart of a city that pulsed with a relentless beat of oppression. Oil lamps flickered against the rough-hewn walls, their warm glow casting soft shadows that danced like specters around the small gathering of Christians. The scent of olive oil mingled with a faint hint of incense, grounding the community in a moment of shared hope amid their collective anxiety. Outside, the streets of Rome echoed with the sounds of life, the distant clatter of carts, the raucous laughter of traders, and the sharp commands of centurions, all reminders of the world that threatened to consume them. Marcus stood among the congregation, a knot of unease twisting in his stomach. His lean frame was taut with tension, and his hazel eyes darted around the circle of familiar faces, each reflecting the flickering light and the shadows of fear. They were all gathered for one purpose: to find strength in their faith, to fortify one another against the storm that loomed on the horizon. "Brothers and sisters," Ignatius began, his voice resonating through the cramped space, a calm beacon amid the turmoil. At 67, the Bishop of Antioch was a stout figure, his grey hair and long beard framing a face that bore the weight of wisdom and experience. Despite the dimness, his deep-set brown eyes shone with a fire that ignited hope in those who listened. "We stand here today, not as scattered sheep, but as a unified flock," he continued, his tone unwavering. "The winds of persecution may howl around us, but our faith is our anchor. We must remember the stories of those who came before us, who faced the lions and yet stood firm." At the mention of the martyrs, a silence fell over the room, thick with reverence. Lydia, a widow whose husband had met a cruel end at the hands of the authorities, shifted in her seat. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she spoke up, her voice trembling yet fierce. "Ignatius, you speak of unity, but what good is unity if it leads us to our deaths? My husband believed, and where did it lead him? I fear for our children, for our lives." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement and dissent, a tempest of emotions swirling within the confined space. Marcus felt his heart race, the weight of leadership pressing down upon him, igniting a flicker of resolve. He rose to his feet, the words spilling forth before he could think to restrain them. "But to hide in shadows is to surrender our faith. We cannot let fear dictate our actions. If we scatter, we lose not only our community but our very purpose. We must gather, we must pray, and we must stand firm." Ignatius nodded, a proud smile breaking through the tension. "Well spoken, Marcus. The Spirit of Christ is within you, a light against the encroaching darkness." Just then, the door creaked open, revealing a figure draped in the garb of a Roman soldier. Gasps swept through the room, faces paling as they instinctively recoiled. Varro stepped inside, his stern face illuminated by the wavering light, a scar running down his cheek like a reminder of battles fought. Marcus's heart raced. Varro was a centurion, a man of the empire, yet today he stood before them, and the air crackled with tension. "Varro," Ignatius greeted him, his voice steady. "What brings you here?" "I come in peace, Bishop," Varro replied, his tone direct, yet there was an undercurrent of conflict in his stance. "I've heard whispers of discontent. The Empire is restless, and I fear they will turn their eyes towards this gathering." Marcus felt a surge of uncertainty. "And why should we trust a soldier of Rome? Your kind is quick to condemn us, Varro." The centurion's gaze shifted to Marcus, a flicker of pain crossing his features. "I am not here to condemn, but to warn. There are those among us who are loyal to the Empire, and there are those who seek to root out dissent." He paused, the weight of his words hanging in the air. "You must be cautious." "Cautious?" Lydia scoffed, her anger flaring. "We have been cautious. We have hidden and whispered in the dark, and what has it brought us? Suffering and loss. If we are to be hunted, let us be hunted together." The discussion swirled, voices rising and falling like waves crashing against the shore. Marcus felt the tumult within him, caught between fear and the fervor ignited by his faith. Varro remained stoic, a silent observer, but Marcus could see the turmoil behind his eyes. "Do you think the Empire cares for our lives, Varro?" Marcus challenged, stepping closer, his voice steady. "You wear their armor, yet you know their cruelty. How can you stand by and watch as they threaten innocent lives?" Varro's jaw clenched, the conflict evident in his posture. "You don't understand. I serve the Empire, but I am not blind to its flaws. I have seen men like you suffer for your beliefs, and it weighs heavily on me." "Then help us," Marcus urged, the plea escaping his lips before he could contain it. "You have the means to protect us. Use your position to shield us from the storm that is coming." A flicker of hesitation passed over Varro's face, but before he could respond, a commotion erupted at the door. A trusted member of their community, a man named Silas, burst in, breathless and wide-eyed. "They're coming! Roman guards are on their way!" Panic surged through the room, the air thickening with fear. Marcus's heart raced, the weight of the moment crashing down upon him. "We must disperse," he shouted, urgency lacing his voice. "Gather what you can carry and flee." "No!" Ignatius commanded, raising his hand. The room fell silent, the weight of his authority halting their impending chaos. "We are not to flee like criminals. We are followers of Christ, and we will not hide from the truth. We must stand together in faith." "But Ignatius, they'll arrest you," Lydia cried, her voice breaking. "We cannot abandon our beliefs, our community." Ignatius's voice remained calm, yet resolute. "We must not allow fear to dictate our actions. If they come, let them find us united." Marcus felt a fire ignite within him, a determination he hadn't realized was there. "Then let us gather in prayer," he proposed, looking around at the faces of his fellow believers. "Let us stand firm, not as scattered sheep, but as a flock ready to face the storm." Varro watched as the community began to kneel, the flickering lamplight casting long shadows over their heads. He felt the weight of his dual allegiance pressing down, a battle within that threatened to tear him apart. He stepped back, uncertainty coursing through him, but he couldn't tear his eyes from the scene before him. Their faith, their unity, their courage. As they prayed together, an unwavering resolve enveloped the room, wrapping them in a shield against the encroaching darkness. Marcus glanced at Ignatius, who remained steadfast, his eyes closed in communion with God. There was something profound in that moment, a sense of purpose that transcended the fear of persecution. But the sense of peace was short-lived. The sound of armored boots echoed from the street, a harbinger of the storm that was about to break. Marcus's heart sank as the footsteps grew nearer, the shift in the atmosphere palpable. He exchanged a glance with Varro, whose face was a mask of conflict, torn between duty and a growing camaraderie with the very people he had been ordered to arrest. The door burst open, and a squad of Roman guards charged in, weapons drawn and eyes scanning for dissent. "By order of the Empire, you are to disperse," the centurion in charge barked, his voice booming through the small room. Marcus stood rooted in place, the faint glimmer of hope flickering in his chest as the realization dawned on him. They were not merely individuals. They were a community bound in faith, ready to face whatever came. "Together!" he shouted, the cry rising above the chaos, a rallying call that echoed through the hearts of those gathered. "We are not afraid." And as they stood, shoulder to shoulder, the storm broke, but they were no longer afraid of the rain. The chapter closes with a visceral clash of faith against the might of the Empire, leaving readers suspended in a moment of tension, a cliffhanger poised on the edge of conflict and resolution. The gathering storm was upon them, and only time would tell what sacrifices they would have to make to stand firm in their beliefs. Hashtag Chapter 9, Chapter 9, The Price of Faith Ignatius, Wheat for the Lions Hashtag Chapter 9, The Price of Faith. The safe house was a sanctuary of shadows, tucked away in a narrow alley in the heart of Rome. Flickering candlelight danced across the walls, illuminating the rough stone and plaster, creating an atmosphere thick with tension. Outside, the shouts of soldiers echoed like distant thunder, punctuated by the clatter of sandals on cobblestones. The sense of smoke and wet earth seeped in through the cracks, mingling with the musty odor of desperation. In the center of the dimly lit room, Ignatius knelt on a worn mat, his gray hair falling in disarray around his weathered face. His voice, a soft murmur, rose in prayer, invoking the strength of his faith amidst the chaos. "Lord, grant us courage in our hour of need." The words were a balm, grounding him as the world threatened to spiral into uncertainty. Marcus paced nearby, his lean frame taut with anxiety. The flickering light caught the glint of sweat on his brow, and his hazel eyes darted to the window where Lucius Varro stood, a stone statue guarding against the encroaching storm. "What if they find us?" Marcus's voice broke, revealing the tremor beneath his brave facade. "What will happen to you, Ignatius?" "They'll kill you." Varro turned slightly, his stern face shadowed by the dim light but betraying a flicker of concern. "The soldiers are searching the streets, but they will not find you here," he said, attempting to instill calm. "This place is hidden well." Marcus bit his lip, recalling the horror he had witnessed in Antioch. The execution of a supposed traitor, a man dragged through the streets, his cries drowned out by the jeers of the crowd. "I can't bear it. I can't watch you die like that." The memory clawed at him, a visceral reminder of the brutality that awaited those who defied the empire. Varro's brow knitted, the weight of his duty pressing heavily upon his shoulders. "If they discover I've aided you," his voice trailed off, heavy with the implications, "I will be labeled a traitor as well. You must understand, Marcus. Loyalty to Rome is not something that can be easily discarded." "Loyalty?" Marcus spat the word, his voice rising, the fear morphing into anger. "What has loyalty brought you? A life of killing and fear? You don't have to choose this, Varro. You can fight for something greater." "Greater?" Varro's voice was low, almost a growl. He turned fully to face Marcus, his muscular frame filling the doorway. "What is greater than the might of Rome? Think of your life, your freedom. You were born a slave, and now you stand beside this man. Do you want to throw that away?" "Freedom?" Marcus echoed bitterly. "What is freedom if it comes at the cost of another's life? Ignatius has shown me a path of love and forgiveness. It is not about power but faith." Before Varro could respond, a folded piece of parchment slipped from his tunic and fluttered to the ground. The cryptic message bore the seal of a fellow centurion, a fellow soldier who had watched Varro rise through the ranks. With trembling hands, he picked it up, his heart racing as he read the words. "The Christians gather in the forum tomorrow. The prefect seeks to make an example of Ignatius. You must act swiftly." The room fell silent, the gravity of the message suffocating. Marcus's breath hitched in his throat as he processed the implications. "They want to arrest him in public? They'll kill him in front of everyone." Varro's eyes darkened, the conflict in his heart waging war against his loyalty to the empire. "If I warn him, I risk everything. If I do nothing—" His voice trailed off again, but the meaning hung heavy in the air. "Do you not see?" Ignatius's voice cut through the tension, calm and steady. "The empire thrives on fear. They wish to crush our spirit, to intimidate us into silence. But true faith cannot be extinguished by swords or prisons." His deep-set eyes, warm yet piercing, met Varro's gaze. "What is your loyalty worth, Centurion? Is it worth the price of a soul?" Varro shifted uncomfortably, the weight of Ignatius's words settling upon him like a shroud. He had been raised to believe in the might of Rome, but here was a man who stood firm against that might, willing to embrace martyrdom. "You speak of sacrifice, but what of those you leave behind?" Varro demanded, his voice strained. "What of your followers?" "Sacrifice is the essence of faith," Ignatius replied, his tone unwavering. "It is in laying down our lives for one another that we find our true purpose. You, too, are faced with a choice, Lucius. When the moment arrives, what will you choose?" Marcus watched Varro's internal struggle play out like a storm on the horizon. The centurion's brow furrowed, the muscles of his jaw tensed as he weighed the implications of Ignatius's challenge. I cannot act against my orders." "Your orders?" Marcus interjected, his voice rising again. "Which orders? The ones that condemn the innocent? The ones that turn a blind eye to the suffering of the people? You have the power to change that." "Enough!" Varro's voice boomed, startling them both. "You do not understand what is at stake. I am a soldier sworn to protect Rome. If I falter, I jeopardize everything." He turned away, his frustration palpable as he gazed out the window at the distant flicker of torchlight. The silence that enveloped them was heavy, thick with the unspoken words of fear and doubt. "Varro," Ignatius said, his voice softening, "your heart is burdened because you feel the weight of your duty. But the true measure of a man is not what he can destroy, but what he can uplift. Faith is not blind obedience. It is a living testament to love and compassion. If you stand by, you will witness injustice and be complicit in it. Is that a legacy you desire?" Varro turned back, his eyes narrowed but filled with uncertainty. "You speak of love, yet love does not shield you from the blades of men. Love does not protect against the empire's iron fist." "Ignatius is right," Marcus said quickly, urgency coursing through him. "You've felt it, haven't you? The injustice, the anger. You can protect him now, save him from a fate that could silence all of us." Varro's hand clenched into a fist, the tension in his body coiling tighter. "And if I do, what then? I forsake my brothers in arms? I become a fugitive. The alternative is to allow an innocent man to die," Ignatius countered gently. "And what of your own soul, Lucius? Will you bear the weight of that on your conscience?" The inner battle within the centurion raged on. He stepped away from the window, pacing as he ran a hand through his hair, the scar on his face catching the light. "What if they find out? What if I fail? Then we will face it together," Marcus said, his voice steady. "You are not alone in this." Finally, Varro stopped, his back to them, his shoulders tense with the weight of his choice. The sounds of the city outside grew more frenetic, the shouts of soldiers growing nearer. He took a deep breath, the air heavy with the scent of impending rain. "If I do this, there is no turning back. I must stand against my own." "Then you will find strength in your conviction, Lucius," Ignatius assured him. "If you choose to protect the innocent, you reclaim your humanity." The moment hung suspended in the air, the tension palpable as Varro turned slowly to face them. "I will not see you taken without a fight," he declared, his voice low and resolute. "But you must be ready to flee at a moment's notice." Before Marcus could respond, the sudden crash of the door splintering against the wall shattered their fragile hope. The soldiers stormed in, torches casting a hellish glow, illuminating the fear etched across their faces. "Lucius, Varro, step aside!" A voice barked from the front, a familiar tone that made Varro's stomach twist. The soldiers shuffled in, armor clanking against armor, the unmistakable scent of sweat and malice filling the room. Marcus's heart raced, and he turned to Ignatius, who remained calm, the flicker of his faith unwavering. "We must go," Marcus urged, but Varro stepped forward, his stance resolute. "Stay behind me," he commanded, his voice a protective growl. "Centurion, you are obstructing an official order." the lead soldier spat, drawing his sword. "Then you will have to go through me," Varro declared, his own hand moving toward the hilt of his gladius. "Lucius, no," Marcus cried out, but Varro's eyes were alight with a newfound fire, a conviction forged in the heat of moral struggle. "Ignatius, run!" Varro shouted, a protective instinct rising from within him. "Get to safety while you can." As the soldiers advanced, the room was filled with chaos, shouts of alarm, the clash of metal, and the desperate scramble for freedom. Marcus felt the world narrow to a single point, the choice that they all had to make in this moment. In the midst of it all, Ignatius stood firm, a bastion of faith and courage. "To live is to embrace the fear, my friends," he called, his voice rising above the din, "and to fight, if only for love, will never be in vain." With Varro standing as a shield, Marcus felt the weight of faith settle in his chest. He was no longer just a slave or a scared boy. He was part of something greater. Together, they faced the encroaching darkness, aware of the price of faith that lay ahead. As the soldiers closed in, the room brimming with tension and uncertainty, Marcus's resolve solidified. No matter the outcome, they would stand together, unyielding against the storm. The price of faith was steep, but it was a price they were willing to pay. And as the door burst open, sealing their fate, Marcus realized that they were all entwined in this battle, a moment that would define them for eternity. Hashtag Chapter 10. Chapter 10. Wheat for the Lions. Hashtag Chapter 10. Wheat for the Lions. The courtroom was a cavernous space, its high arched ceilings echoing the hushed whispers of the gathered crowd. Sunlight filtered in weakly through barred windows, casting elongated shadows that danced across the stone floor, highlighting the dust motes swirling lazily in the stale air. Citizens of Rome, clad in tunics of varying quality, filled the benches, their expressions a mixture of morbid curiosity and tense anticipation. At the front, the judges sat, stern and impassive, their togas draped elegantly over their shoulders, exuding an air of unyielding authority. Marcus stood at the back, his heart pounding in rhythm with the distant clang of armor as the imperial guards shifted restlessly. He could feel the weight of the crowd's gaze, a palpable force pressing against him, but his focus remained fixed on Ignatius, who stood resolute at the center of the courtroom. Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch, was no longer the gentle figure who had shared stories of faith and hope in dimly lit rooms. He was now a beacon of unwavering conviction in the face of impending doom. "Bring forth the prisoner," intoned the chief judge, his voice slicing through the murmurs like a sword through silk. Ignatius was flanked by two guards, their faces stern and unsympathetic, as they guided him to the center. Despite the shackles that bound his wrists, he stood tall, his gray hair framing a face etched with lines of wisdom and determination. "Lucius Varro," the judge called, and Marcus's breath caught in his throat. Varro, the centurion, moved forward with the practiced grace of a soldier, his scarred face betraying nothing of the internal conflict that churned within him. He had always been a man of duty, but today, the weight of his orders felt heavier than the armor he wore. "Ignatius of Antioch," began the chief judge, "you stand accused of refusing to worship the emperor and inciting rebellion among the citizens of Rome. How do you plead?" "I plead for the souls of my brothers and sisters," Ignatius replied, his voice steady and resonant. "I am the wheat of Christ. May I be ground by the teeth of beasts, that I may rise anew in him." The words hung in the air, heavy with conviction. A hush fell over the courtroom as Marcus's heart swelled with a mixture of admiration and despair. He recalled the countless hours spent in Ignatius's presence, the lessons woven into their shared moments, the way Ignatius had transformed his fear into faith. Now, that same faith was leading him to his death. "Do you not fear the lions?" the judge pressed, his brow furrowing. "Fear," Ignatius echoed, a faint smile touching his lips. "I do not fear the beasts of the arena. I fear only the judgment of my Lord. My life is but a fleeting moment. My soul is eternal." Marcus could feel the tears threatening to spill from his eyes, but he blinked them away, urging himself to maintain composure. He had come to witness a testament of faith, yet the reality of losing Ignatius was unbearable. In that moment, as the old man stood unyielding, Marcus whispered a silent prayer, asking for strength to carry on Ignatius's legacy. As the trial progressed, Varro found himself torn between his duty to the empire and the compassion that Ignatius inspired within him. The judge continued to press Ignatius with questions, each one designed to elicit a confession or plea for mercy, but Ignatius remained steadfast. The atmosphere grew more oppressive, the tension palpable, as the crowd shifted restlessly, whispering amongst themselves. "Centurion," a superior officer called to Varro, stepping beside him with a frown etched upon his brow. "Ensure this trial concludes swiftly. We have no time for sentimentality. The emperor desires a show of strength, and this man's defiance cannot be tolerated." Varro's jaw clenched, and he turned his gaze to Ignatius, who was now addressing the crowd directly. "Brothers and sisters," Ignatius's voice rang out, "do not be afraid, for even in suffering, we find the grace of God. Our faith is not in the power of man, but in the love of Christ, who has conquered death itself." The words ignited a flicker of hope within Marcus, but he could see Varro's internal struggle mirrored in the lines of his face. Would the centurion remain a mere instrument of the empire, or would he rise to protect the fragile faith that was blossoming around him? "Your loyalty to Rome will be tested, centurion," the officer continued, his tone low and threatening. "You know the consequences of defiance. Do not let sentiment cloud your judgment." Varro clenched his fists, his knuckles white against the leather of his armor. He could feel the pull of Ignatius's teachings, the love and compassion that had begun to seep into his hardened heart. "I will do my duty," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper, but the words felt heavy with doubt. The trial reached its climax as the judges huddled together, deliberating in hushed tones. Marcus held his breath, the silence stretching like a taut bowstring. When the judges returned, the chief judge's expression was grim. "Ignatius of Antioch," he declared, "you are found guilty of the charges against you. We sentence you to be thrown to the lions, that the might of Rome may be demonstrated and your insurrection quashed." The crowd erupted in a mix of gasps and murmurs, a wave of shock that washed over the people. Ignatius, however, remained calm. "May my death serve to nourish the seeds of faith that have been sown," he proclaimed, his voice unwavering. "I go to my Lord, and I rejoice." In that moment, Marcus felt the ground beneath him shift. The despair he had harbored turned into a fierce determination. Ignatius's acceptance of his fate ignited something within him, a burning desire to carry forth the message of love and faith, no matter the cost. "Marcus!" Varro's voice broke through the chaos, pulling him from his reverie. The centurion's face was pale, but his eyes held a glimmer of something new, resolve. "We must not let this happen without a fight. What can we do?" Marcus whispered, the weight of the moment bearing down on him. "We are powerless against the will of the empire." "Perhaps not," Varro replied, stepping closer, his voice low and urgent. "I cannot allow this man's death to go unanswered. I have seen the truth in his words, and I will not stand idly by while he is sacrificed." As the guards began to lead Ignatius away, Marcus felt the pull of destiny. "What do you mean?" he asked, his heart racing. "I will speak out," Varro declared, his voice stronger now, resonating with conviction. "I will demand to know why we condemn a man for his faith, while we allow the true insurrection to fester in our hearts. There is no shame in compassion, and I will not sacrifice my integrity for the empire." Marcus's heart soared. "You would do that for him? For us, Varro affirmed, his gaze unwavering, for the faith that is growing within us, a faith that could turn the tide of this empire. With newfound determination, Marcus nodded, feeling the fire of conviction burning within him. He would not let Ignatius's sacrifice be in vain. As the guards turned, leading Ignatius through the archway toward the arena, Marcus stepped forward, a sense of purpose propelling him. "Ignatius," he called, his voice ringing out clear and strong. The old bishop paused, turning to meet his gaze, and in that moment, the world around them faded away. "Marcus, my son," Ignatius replied, a serene smile gracing his lips. "Do not grieve for me. I go to my Lord, and I will be with him. But you shouldn't have to die," Marcus protested, the weight of sorrow threatening to consume him. "You've shown us the way. You've given us hope." "Hope is not lost, dear Marcus," Ignatius said, his voice calm and soothing. "It is just beginning to bloom. Carry my words in your heart, and let them take root in others. I am but a vessel. The true power lies within the faith we share." As the guards tugged at Ignatius's arms, the moment began to slip away. Marcus felt a surge of urgency. "I promise to honor your legacy, Ignatius. I will spread your message, no matter the cost." "Then you must be brave," Ignatius replied, his eyes glimmering with the light of conviction. "Even in the face of despair, let love guide your actions. That is the true essence of our faith." With those final words, Ignatius was led away, the old man's figure slowly disappearing into the shadows of the archway. The crowd began to murmur, the tension thickening as they anticipated the spectacle that was to come. Marcus felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Varro, his expression resolute. "We must act now," he said. "Are you with me?" "Yes," Marcus replied, feeling the weight of destiny upon him. "Let us stand for what is right. For Ignatius." Together, they moved through the crowd, determined to confront an empire that had lost its way. The roar of the people and the impending doom of the arena loomed ahead, but in that moment, they found strength in their unity, a unity forged in the fires of faith. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the ancient stones, Marcus and Varro felt the stirrings of change. The seeds of faith had been sown, and amidst the darkness, a flicker of hope began to ignite, a light that would guide them forward into an uncertain future. In the arena, Ignatius faced the lions with courage, and through his martyrdom, he would nourish a faith that would outlast the empire itself. And as Marcus echoed his vow to carry forth the message of love, he knew that the true fight had only just begun.